Welcome to a special event release of the Sound of Movement podcast. In this 7-part series, we will reveal why conventional stretching methods are dead and introduce you to the 5 steps to unlocking strength and flexibility in adulthood. Strap yourself in and get ready. This is the Flexibility Blueprint 2023 edition. Before we get started, as with all our blueprints, the 2023 edition is available to everyone for free, because my brother Yanni and I want to democratize health and fitness education to empower everyone to unleash their inner athlete by achieving the highest levels of health and athletic performance possible. So please support us by liking and leaving a comment. Give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, and please give us a Google review if you haven't done so already. And most importantly, if you learn something or benefit from this episode, chances are someone you know would too. So pretty please, with a sprinkle of sugar on top. Share the content with your inner circle by clicking that little button below the stream window on Spotify and then send it to one of your friends. Do that right now. It would mean the world to Yanni and I, and it will mean a lot to your friends. In today's episode, we unpack the 2 must-know training principles required to unlock flexibility. After years of physical wear and tear for military service, boxing and bodybuilding, we knew it was time to change our approach. We needed to train smarter, not harder. Teaming up with some of the best experts in strength, flexibility, and physical therapy, we explored and perfected a whole new way to enhance flexibility, whilst also increasing strength, a method that has now been in the making for a decade. Wanting to unleash strength and flexibility beyond the standard gym junkie? This is for you. All right, the first flexibility adaptation principle that we're going to discuss today is learning to release your brakes. So I like to say that flexibility isn't just about stretching your muscles, it's about turning the limits of your body into doorways for your passion. Flexibility doesn't mean making your muscles longer, as many people think. It's more about changing how your muscles work. Now, to really understand this, we need to look at how muscles function. It's not too complex, but it does involve your nervous system. Your body has 2 main safety features that work with flexibility. Number 1 is preventing overstretching. So signals between your nervous system and muscles make sure you don't stretch too far and get hurt. Number 2 is preventing overlifting. The same communication happens to make sure you don't lift too much weight and cause an injury. Conventional stretching methods take weeks or months to increase your flexibility, but there's a way to speed up the process. You can hack the second safety feature, the one that stops you from lifting too much weight, to become more flexible in just seconds. By knowing how your body works, you can make big improvements in your flexibility. It's not just about stretching, it's about understanding your body and using it in the best way possible. All right, let's have a look at the load management principle and going from a cup to a swimming pool. It's not the exercise that hurt you, it's how you got there. That's a great quote from our friend Nilesh Murthy, who's a sports physiotherapist for some of the top football clubs in Australia. Managing load is key to strength and flexibility. When mishandled, it leads to injury. Imagine your load capacity as a small cup, with your daily activities as water pouring into it. So your exercise, work at your desk, moving furniture, or playing golf, they all fill the cup. That sharp pain in your elbow or knee is your warning sign of the cup overflowing. A tough gym workout might fill the cup in one go. Add more and it spills over, and that's when you get hurt. But what if you could make that cup bigger? Here's where load capacity comes in. Start with proper training and load management, and your cup grows into a bucket. Soon it could be as big as a swimming pool. What once filled and spilled your cup is now just a drop in the bucket. Think of exercises like the Jefferson curl, which some call dangerous. But it's not the exercise that's bad, it's poor preparation. If you try to lift 44 pounds in a warm-up like I do, you could get hurt. Not because of the exercise, but because your cup isn't as big as mine. Unity Gym's approach helps you grow your cup safely. Our 20-minute mobility routine is for those just starting to fill their cup. The Flexibility Masterclass helps expand it into a bucket. Are you ready for a swimming pool? Then join the UMS Tribe membership. Understanding load capacity is like knowing how big your cup is. Train right, grow your cup, and enjoy more flexibility and strength without the risk of injury. That's how you make big splashes in your fitness journey. All right. How are you today, Yanni?
Mate, I'm good. I'm excited about this series of podcasts supporting our 2024 edition of the Flexibility Blueprint. I think that it's a really important message, and I think that it's going to benefit a lot of people. A lot of people are going to change the way they train based off the back of this. And, we've been beating the drum recently about the fact that YouTube content is great to gain insight, but it's not good necessarily to put a program together and get to what you're trying to achieve, because nothing is designed specifically for you, and most of it that's out there is really going to stifle you because it's not suitable for where you are. It's not suitable for your stage. And I will say, before we go any further, if you didn't catch episode 1 in this series, where we define the 3 stages of flexibility development, I would circle back and watch that episode. It's very, very important to understand the 3 stages. We've sort of condensed a couple of decades worth of knowledge into this format to make it as simple as possible, so that you can choose to focus only on the information that is suitable for where you're at right now, that's going to give you the next big leap in your flexibility and strength development. The problem that most people face, and the reason why most people plateau and don't get very good results, is because they're practicing or focusing on content on YouTube and other social media platforms that is just simply not suitable for their stage in development. And that's why the same piece of content can serve 2 people completely differently. One person can have a huge breakthrough from that, and another person can even become injured or become really confused by the same piece of content. They're 2 people at different stages in their development. And I think that, this is it's an exciting series.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, we've had so many people comment when we teased the 2024 Flexibility Blueprint release. I didn't really realize that message would resonate so well with people, this idea of the amount of information that's out there now about flexibility. But have a think about how much content did you consume last week about flexibility? Because I bet anybody listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube consumed maybe an hour or 2 hours or whatever it was of flexibility content, and then think, what did that invested time do for your training this week? Did it cause you to take action in something that's, producing a result? If it didn't, that's exactly what the Flexibility Blueprint's for. And if you're listening to this prior to the release date of the 2024 Flexibility Blueprint will be in the description of this podcast and video. And if you're listening to it post release date, you'll see the link right there. So get on it. It's completely free, and it's going to tell you exactly what to do to get a real flexibility breakthrough in the next 28 days based on whether you're stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3 flexibility.
And I think, what I'd like to explain in this episode is really the story behind how we came up with this, and the the relationships we built with experts in their field in strength and conditioning, physical therapy, and the like. But before we do, why don't we I'll just quickly remind you of the 3 stages. Stage 1 is when you're an absolute beginner. And you can go onto our website blog and read this stuff for yourself. You can backtrack and listen to the podcast. But in stage 1, you're just starting, likely watching YouTube videos and seeking that first breakthrough. Unity Gym's experience with more than 10,000 people has shown that people at this stage respond best to a simple daily mobility routine. This 20-minute routine is achievable, makes you feel better instantly, and is easy to include in your day. And the reason why it works so well, a 20-minute routine, is because and that 20-minute is not arbitrary. We've tried so many different amounts of stimulus, and 20 minutes we found is enough. It's small enough that most people can get it done, but it's big enough that you do get enough volume at this stage in your development. And the reason why a whole body routine, unlike a program split, which is more of a stage 2 program, works so well for a beginner is because a beginner doesn't need as much volume on the specific muscles or movements as a beginner, as a more advanced practice. So a daily routine that covers the whole body is actually sufficient. The other benefit to that is that it's much easier to learn. Once you've done it a few times, you'll know what you're doing, you'll feel more comfortable doing it, and you're more likely to be motivated by the routine. And most importantly, at stage 1, whatever you choose to do, it has to give you an instant result. It cannot be something that you only experience a result 28 days or 12 weeks in the future. And you can find a good routine like our 20-minute routine, mobility routine, that will make you feel better after the first time you practice it. You'll see improvements, and that's really, really important. Stage 2 is when you need more volume. You've already been stretching. Now your body's comfortable with the sensation of stretching and practicing flexibility. And now you do need to start to break the workout up into a training split that allows you to focus more volume on each specific muscle group. But more importantly, what Rad and I have found with our tribe, and what gives us the biggest breakthrough, is you start to actually move beyond stretching muscles and start to practice movement skills, like, for instance, the Jefferson curl that's on the screen now, like, for instance, pancakes, like, for instance, middle splits, front splits, and back bridge. When you start to focus on benchmark movement skills, not only does progress become much more tangible, but those movement skills have a tendency to carry over better to the strength sports that you're doing, like weightlifting, like martial arts, like calisthenics, gymnastics, and even yoga. So we like to focus on movement skills in phase 2 as opposed to compartmentalizing muscle stretching and mobility drills in phase 1. And then finally, phase 3 is what Rad actually came up with this very much based on his following of Ido Portal, but we call this the specialist phase. And in the specialist phase in stage 3, we tend to see two types of people. Either they're really, really flexible, yogis and people like that, but they lack strength. And then their flexibility doesn't carry over very well into the functional realm, into doing anything outside of their stretching practice. Or on the other side of the spectrum, they're Hulk strong, huge. They've been into powerlifting, bodybuilding, whatever, and they've developed an enormous amount of strength, but they're really stiff as a breadboard. They can't even touch their toes. And both of those extremes are actually quite risky because of the amount that you can stretch, the depth of your stretches, or, the sheer amount of weight that you're able to lift in your workouts. If you stagnate at that point and don't start to learn to integrate strength and flexibility into your routine, you actually risk quite severe injury. And we like to get people at that point really integrating strength and flexibility into their workouts so that they become more balanced and they become more functional. They develop functional strength that can be deployed into their chosen sport or preferred hobbies and things like that, whether it be MMA, martial arts, yoga, Cali, whatever. And so those are the 3 stages. Those 3 stages we've really, really sort of condensed it down and found that once you start to understand what stage you're at, then it's really easy to eliminate 80% of the content that's available to you and just focus on the 20% that matters most. That's going to get you your big developmental leap forward. And yeah, you'll see huge results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the 3 stages of flexibility that Yanni has just gone over there. It's something that we just identified over our time when we reflected back, because Yanni and I weren't flexible when we were younger. We weren't, like, I did martial arts and I've got pictures of me doing impressive martial arts feats in Kung Fu that people have tried to pull me up on before and say, oh, but you were flexible, but it was totally one-dimensional. And I can assure you that I could squeeze myself into a position for a picture, but it was so uncomfortable. Every picture that you see of me doing Kung Fu when I was younger, that is my absolute extreme capability, and I couldn't move through those movements. That was me being able to pose well for a photo. And when we were in our mid-30s, we both realized how clearly we just weren't flexible. And for me, I became flexible before Yanni did. I put the hard yards in earlier, and so I became, Yanni and I were both stage 3 people, where Yanni he was super strong, and he's always been stronger than me because of his investment in strength training, but he couldn't even squat without rounding his back. And when he tried to, and because I developed flexibility quicker than him, I was able to out squat him and out Olympic lift him pretty quickly, because those are movements that flexibility seriously adds to the movement. But I was the opposite. I had that flexibility, but I didn't have that strength. And so we both suffered for that. I had slap tears in both shoulders because I was trying to push myself to be able to do movements that I wasn't strong enough for in calisthenics. Yanni had a torn ACL and other injuries in his...
My most obvious example of this was when I did my first bodybuilding camp with Ben Pekulski, who's now become good friends to Rad and I. And I was warming up on a squat at 70 kilos, which at the time was a decent squat for me. You know, it sounds ridiculous now, but I just didn't have the stability and flexibility to hit that ass to grass squat. And as a result of excessive butt wink, it caused a spasm in my back that put me in hospital. And it was embarrassing. I was in a room with a bunch of personal trainers and bodybuilders. And, you know, the first little warm up that we did, it ruined me. And I just felt really ashamedly embarrassed. It just sat with me. It stayed with me for a long time. You know, why did I get so hurt and end up in hospital from a 70 kilogram squat? And the reality was I just simply wasn't flexible enough. And going back to the purposes of today's podcast, the two must know principles to strength and conditioning. It's very hard to manage load if you are a specialist in one of these, and you'll get to a point where you just continually start to feel pain in your joints or you're suffering injuries because you're practicing still as a level 2. You're still doing the same thing over and over and over again. But what's going to give you the biggest breakthrough is that strength and flexibility integration into your workouts. And it's very, very important, and it's very hard to manage load. You got to remember that cup analogy. You know, your cup is going to continually overflow if you don't achieve that balance between strength and flexibility. And in addition, you know, the flexibility adaptation principle is where it really comes into play in phase 2. In phase 1, it's about keeping things simple. It's about doing something that makes you feel good. It's about doing something that inspires and empowers you and motivates you to keep going, you know. And that's why it's so important to get such a quick result, because that's going to ignite your motivation and keep you traveling forward. And, you know, when Rad and I first created the 20-minute routine, we did it for 28 days and the breakthrough was incredible. You know, my squat, the butt wink in my squat was gone. There was so many great adaptations that occurred from that 28-day period. And don't get me wrong, we did that routine every day, even on the weekends, you know, because it's light enough, it's gentle enough that you can do that and you're not overloading. It's very easy to manage load with that 20-minute routine because you're not doing loaded stretching. You're not doing the real intense stuff, you know. So yeah, it's very important. But then when you get into that phase 2, and this is when we created our flexibility masterclass, we started to plateau. And the initial results we got from the 20-minute mobility routine, you know, started to stop. You know, we weren't getting better and better doing the same thing. We weren't getting better and better. And that's when we realized that we needed to apply, you know, basic fundamental strength and conditioning principles to our stretching as well, you know, and that includes load management, that includes progressive overload, that includes super compensation, meaning, you know, stimulate, recover, stimulate at the right time that you catch the peak of your adaptation. If you wait too long, you lose your gains. If you go too early, you stifle your gains. So learning to understand this sort of stuff and apply common strength and conditioning principles to your flexibility is really, really important at phase 2. And it took us a lot of trial and error. You know, Rad and I are experimenting with different times of the day to train, how to separate our strength and flexibility, how to, you know, do all of our stretching and not overdo it. Because when you start to get into that phase 2 and you're loading the stretches and you're training in a split now where you're doing different movement skills on different days, it's very, very easy to stuff up your load management at that point and do too much. And it's very common, right, Rad? Especially with middle splits training, you get people who are trying to do They really want to unlock a specific movement skill. Probably the most common I see in the comments on our YouTube channel is middle splits. They want to get their middle splits. They want to look like Jean-Claude Van Damme, and they try to do it every single day. And it's like, it would be no different to doing a squat program every single day. You could do that for a couple of weeks, and we do that in a super compensation program, but then you rest for like a week afterwards to try and recover. If you just do that constantly, you eventually overload and overfill your cup, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a shame the way that people get injured with what they do, because the people that get injured are usually the people that have I shouldn't say usually, they're often the people that have the greatest desires and ambitions, and they're really, really keen, and they just go hell for leather and go all in on it. And exactly what Yanni just said. They try, like, I see comments of people talking about what they're doing, and they're doing it 5 or 6 days a week to do the middle splits. And it's like Yanni said, it'd be like squatting, 5 or 6 days a week. And you can do that. Like, I just did a phase where I was doing a method called Grease the Groove with dips and with a pronator grip pull-up chest to bar hold. And I was doing between 6 and 8 sets a day, every day, 5 days a week throughout the day. That's what Grease the Groove is. Like, you don't do them in your workout, you do it throughout the day. But I did that for 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I needed a deload period because I was just so cooked from it. And people don't understand how programming works and how load management works. It's a really, really misunderstood concept. And this is where good programming, like something like the Flexibility Masterclass, comes in, and where the concept of the load management principle, going from a cup to a swimming pool, where that comes in as well. Because people coming in with that cup, even just doing the Flexibility Masterclass for a week could cause injury for those people. It could be too much. But that's where the 20-minute mobility routine really shines, because it gives them that first big win, and it turns that cup into a little furnace, like something that's halfway between a cup and a bucket, and it gets you ready for that Flexibility Masterclass. And yeah, the way that we do middle splits, like the way that I've learned the best way to do it, you do it either 2 or 3 times a week. The more times a week that you do it, the gentler you have to go. And you can relate that to, a weightlifting session. If you want to do bench press and row 3 times a week, each session that you do it, you have to plan that you're going to be doing it again in 48 hours. And so you if you're smart, you plan the load in the session a certain way, which would be different than if you were only doing bench press and row once a week and you knew you had 6 days to recover. Or you would train in a way where you plan to have a deload week after a set amount of weeks, so that you're intentionally pushing yourself into that state of overreaching, but then you deload to recover. And these are higher level concepts that require a real understanding of how load works, how load management works, how supercompensation works, and get it right, and you see consistent progress with flexibility, with minimal aches and pains and no injuries. And get it wrong, you see stagnation, plateau, lots of aches and pains, and injuries.
Sometimes really nasty injuries. I can speak from experience, because a year ago I tore my left hamstring badly, and it took 8 months to be able to stretch at full capacity again. So it's not something that you want to muck around with. And the reason why that happened was because I wasn't managing external load. So you've got the load that that's obvious, how much weight you lift in the gym, how many times you go to the gym and do the workout, the amount of rest that you give yourself between each workout. That's the obvious load. The not so obvious load is what you get up to on the weekend. It might be that you play golf on the weekend. It might be that you help someone move house on the weekend and you're lifting heavy stuff all weekend. And that load needs to be considered when you go back to the gym the following week. And what I did was, I had a really big weekend. We had a celebration on Friday night after we sold Unity Gym. We went out and, it consumed way too much alcohol, had way too little sleep. And then I was busy doing stuff over the weekend that I didn't really take into consideration. And I jumped back into the gym on Monday morning, expecting to just go straight back into where I left off the following week. And yeah, my body was just like, no, mate, this is not how it works. And I tore my hamstring. And so, you've got to take into consideration those external variables as well when you're considering load management. And, even what I'm doing right now, sitting in a chair, contributes to the load that my lower back is dealing with, that my hip flexors are dealing with, that my glutes are dealing with, that my shoulders are dealing with, because I'm slouching slightly and the rhomboids and the upper trapezius are sort of trying to hold my posture up, So, you've got to take this stuff into consideration when you're managing load.
Yeah, another really common thing that people come to us for, and this is not to do with flexibility, but you might relate to it because it's so common, is golfer's elbow or tennis elbow. So medial or lateral epicondylitis, which is inflammation of the medial on the inside, golfer's elbow tendons of the epicondyle, or the lateral tendons of the epicondyle. So the tendons that connect onto that. And that comes from too much load. So and that it goes perfectly in alignment with what Yanni said, because it usually comes not just from going to the gym. In fact, it's rarely just from that. It's because we do so much with our hands all day. So, just carrying shopping and picking the kids up, opening doors, anything like that involves those muscles puts load there. And then when you go to the gym and you try and hammer yourself with pull-ups or rows or whatever it is, that's when you overflow that cup and you can get that abusive load to the tendons. And I actually got my first relapse of golfer's elbow 3 weeks ago for the first time in about 6 years. I got golfer's elbow for the first time about 6 years ago, and it got so bad because I did not know what I know now, and I just kept trying to train through the pain, and I got to a point where I couldn't do any pulling at all. This time around, it came on so hard and fast. I went from not feeling anything to the next day like, oh my God, it was terrible, but I know exactly what to do with it. And so I changed my program to reduce the load on those tendons, but allow me to keep training. So an example is I removed pull-ups from my program because that's just too much load, and I replaced it with some ring rows one day of the week and a bent over row on the other day of the week. So I'm still training the same muscles. I'm still training all the pulling muscles. I'm training my lats. I'm training my scapular stabilizers. I'm training my biceps, my posterior deltoid. But I've reduced the load in a way that my body can adapt to it and reduce the inflammation and overcome it. And then I've added in some forearm pronation and supination exercises, some wrist flexion extension, some grip crushing, so that I'm also training the tendons in ways that I wasn't training before. Now so because I know what I know and how to overcome this injury, 3 weeks later, I'm symptom free. It's completely gone. And I'll do it for another month because I'll really make sure that I lock in, the strength that's required, and I allow my body time to recover. But the same principle applies with stretching and flexibility. It's this idea that people often, like they tear a muscle, or they get a muscle strain or a muscle spasm or whatever because they push too hard. That's really, really common. And by the way, that is, you should not feel that level of pain when you're stretching. That's, I'll lead into this flexibility adaptation principle, learning to release the brakes from this. I'll segue into that. And then they think, okay, well, I can't stretch again until this muscle strain goes away. And then you start to develop this pain memory, this, like whatever the strain was or the tear, it heals itself really quickly if it's just a muscle tear. But often you'll go back to stretch again after several weeks of rest and you still feel pain. And that's like the pain memory. And we can avoid that by, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to rest and I'm not going to do anything, by using the same principles of load management that I just described with golfer's elbow. Now, I'll segue into the other flexibility adaptation principle that we haven't spoken about yet, which is learning to release your brakes. And this is we're really going deep into the mechanism of flexibility here, because people think that flexibility is about making your muscles longer. And in a way it is. Of course, your muscles will lengthen more. Your muscle fibers will lengthen more when you have more flexibility. But the adaptation of flexibility that occurs from the stimulus of the workouts that we do, the majority of that adaptation actually occurs in the nervous system, and the way that the nervous system interacts with the muscles. And we have all these different kinds of nervous systems within our body, within our spinal cord and in between our spinal cord and the muscles. And they have all these different jobs. And some are there to send a signal to the muscle to contract it, and others are there to sense and get feedback that goes back to the spinal cord so that reaction can happen, because reaction isn't controlled in our brain, it's controlled in the spinal cord, to prevent us from getting hurt. And this is a really basic description of it, but this is how it works. And so, as we said before, there's this one sensory system where it's these signals between your nervous system and muscles basically to make sure that you don't stretch too far and get hurt. So when you try to stretch, there's this stretch reflex that happens that tightens up the muscles that prevents you going too far. And then there's another system that basically prevents us from lifting too much weight, where it's when we go up to a 400-pound barbell and we try to lift it and it's way beyond what we can do, and this sensory system called the Golgi tendon organ, or the GTO, it senses the load and it just shuts down the other sensory system's ability to contract the muscle, which prevents us from injury. Now that system, that second system that I just described, that senses load and shuts down the ability to contract, that's what we can actually hack through more advanced flexibility techniques. And I'll put on a little video here in just a sec so you can see this while Yanni's having a chat. But by basically using something called end range contractions, or end range contractions for antagonistic muscles, meaning the opposing muscles that we're trying to get flexible, what we do is, by contracting the muscles very hard at their end range in their shortened state, we can attempt to trigger that GTO's function of shutting down the ability to contract muscles, which happens all through the joint. So it happens on the opposing side as well, on the muscles that we're trying to get flexible, to give us instant flexibility gains. And then when we pair that with something called loaded stretching, which not only helps to increase range with an external load, but it also helps to thicken the muscle fibers with a hypertrophy response that comes from something called eccentric contractions that we do when we're going down deeper into the stretch. When you combine those things together, that's when we see huge flexibility improvements. And that's essentially what the Flexibility Masterclass does. It's a whole series of end range contractions paired with loaded stretches to get very, very fast and very tangible flexibility improvements for those people that are at stage 2 flexibility.
And the important thing is that, everyone who's starting out who wants to get flexible, they're going to go, oh my God, I just want to dive straight into that, or our, stage 3 programs. But in reality, you got to remember, if you're only just starting out with your stretching, you've got a very small cup and it's going to overflow very, very quickly. And in most cases, it'll be almost impossible, unless you had myself or Rad or a qualified UMS coach with you, to manage your load doing a stage 2 or 3 program when you're at stage 1. You're just not ready for it. But what Rad's talking about here, and we've sort of coined this ourselves, the flexibility adaptation principle. This is absolutely revolutionary if you're not used to it. And this is why in the UMS app, in our UMS tribe membership, we pair strength and flexibility in the same workout. And that's very status quo busting a method, because you get taught in strength and conditioning and in personal training that you can't ride 2 horses with one ass. You've got to either do strength training or you do stretching. You don't do the 2 together. When in actual fact, there is a plethora of research to indicate that when you train opposing muscle groups in a workout, like for instance, if you pair the bench press with a bent over row, you increase not only the efficiency of the workout, but the adaptation response as well. And in the same token, when you pair antagonistic stretches with strength exercises, you radically boost the adaptation process. And this is how we can get very quick results with really strong specialists, or really flexible specialists at that specialist stage 3 level. They come into our Unity Gym, into our UMS program, and are astonished at how quickly they can break plateaus in their performance, whether it be for flexibility or for strength, because of the way we pair them together and we utilize. We're just teaching them how to use their body to its maximum capacity based on these scientific principles that have stood the test of time, that we do apply in our training, but just seldom do we combine them together.
But I'm going to put the brake. I'm going to put the brakes on you there, because I've already made this mistake by giving away a whole bunch of information from lesson 1 of the Flexibility Blueprint, which is another episode of this podcast that's coming up. And Yanni's already jumped ahead 2 points by going into antagonistic muscles being trained 1-to-1, and also into that other point that you just made there. So we probably should wrap this up, because we're definitely delving into our next episodes in this series. But this series is going to be game-changing for you. We're here talking about the 2024 Flexibility Blueprint, which is going to be the official release date. Check the description of this podcast or video if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're watching this a little bit later, after we've already launched the 2024 Flexibility Blueprint, you'll be able to get a link in the description there where you can download it. It's completely free. And make no mistake, if you are somebody who is consuming a lot of video content on flexibility on YouTube, but you're not seeing the progress in your actual development that you are wanting, this is for you. This is going to help you to cut through it all and identify your next critical step so that you take action and move forward and get a real breakthrough in the next 28 days. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in our next episode. Oh, and one last thing. Please give us a review if you're listening to this podcast. They really mean the world to us. And share this with your friends. We give away really, really good free content because we're aware that so many people out there just can't afford to pay for coaching. So we do our darndest to get really good free content out there, and all we ask in return is that you share it with your friends. So all you need to do right now is just hit that share button, copy the link, and then paste it into Messenger or an email, however you communicate with your friends, and please share it with at least someone that you think would get value out of this. Thanks so much, everyone. Hey, are you confused by all the free content you've tried on YouTube without getting the results you want? Our tribe thrives because we find what's right for each person's developmental stage. Then we cut out the irrelevant 80% of online information so they can double down on the 20% that matters most. If you want to learn what stage you're at and are ready to take action, then listen up. We can help. Just starting out and struggling to see results? Then you're at stage 1 and need to keep it simple. A gentle yet efficient whole body routine that ignites motivation by delivering instant results is the key. If you don't feel better after your first try, you're wasting your time. Our 20-minute mobility routine is perfect for you at stage 1. Stretching regularly but hitting roadblocks? Then you're at stage 2 and will benefit from targeting different muscles to unlock specific moves like back bridges or splits. It's time to challenge yourself. Ready for the next step? Our Flexibility Masterclass is your key. Flexible but need more strength, or strong but lacking flexibility? Whether you're super flexible but lack strength, or Hulk strong without functional flexibility, there's room to grow. And grow you must, because the depth of your stretches or the impressive plate stack on your barbell means stagnation at this stage risks serious injury. Integrating strength and flexibility is now essential and your next leap forwards. Our flagship online coaching system, the UMS Tribe membership, is your ideal solution to achieve peak performance in your best years. One simple subscription for everything we do. Knowing the 3 stages and what stage you're at in your flexibility journey can be the difference between frustrating plateaus, painful injuries, and monumental leaps forward in skill. Head over to unitygym.com to get started.